Good evening, friends. Let me first of all, welcome our chief guest, senior advocate and Honorable Rajasthan MP, Shri Bikash Ranjan Bhattacharya, who will deliver the 34th AKG Memorial Lecture. Shri Bhattacharya is also the president of All India Lawyers Union. He was the mayor of Kolkata Municipal Corporation. I also welcome my colleague, Shashi Kumar, president of Jan Samskriti, and Sonu Vincent, Joint Secretary of Jan Samskriti. In this pandemic period, we are organizing this edition of the lecture virtually in view of the COVID-19 government protocols. And welcome all our friends and well-wishers who have joined us with this live. This is the 34th AKG Memorial Lecture, commemorating the legendary and great revolutionary leader, Comrade AKG, who was born on this day, that is 1st October in 1904 in Kannur, Kerala. AKG, who was arrested by the British government and was in Vellore Central Jail in Tamil Nadu when the nation celebrated her independence. And he hoisted the national flag at the jail on 15th August 1947. He was the first leader of the opposition bloc in the parliament. We always took up contemporary and relevant subjects in all our AKG Memorial Lectures. This year, we have chosen the topic, Democracy, Judiciary, Social Justice. I, on behalf of Jana Samskriti and all of the viewers, once again warmly welcome our guest and speaker, Shri Bikash Ranjan Bhattacharya. Now I request Shashi Kumar to preside over the program and control further proceedings. Thank you.
Respected Comrade Bikash Ranjan Bhattacharya and my dear friends and well-wishers of Jan Samskriti. Jan Samskriti feels indeed great pleasure and proud for the fact that we have been commemorating Comrade AKG for the past 3 decades without any interruption with a lecture. As Mr. Vinod pointed out, every year we took up the most relevant contemporary subject and we try to tell the people what exactly we should do and what exactly the situation or condition of the country is. The only change in this current edition is, as he said, during this pandemic time, we are forced to conduct it online. So we hope our all friends and relatives will join us. AKG needs no introduction to most of us, but maybe young generation may not be well aware of who AKG was and what kind of a leader, what kind of a revolutionary leader he was. As we know, wherever people struggled, wherever common people suffered, wherever the farmers, the peasants, the working class and the marginalized section suffered, AKG always was there. Without any hesitation, across the country, he was there with the people wherever they are in pain. That is why I have heard in Punjab, he was Gopal Singh. In Kerala, we know he was AKG. So he was known pan-India. Every Indian respected AKG as a great leader. And as an opposition leader also, he expressed his ability, how to take up things in a positive way, but very strongly. That is why Nehru once said, AKG once said, my facts may be broken, my English, my language may be broken, but facts are intact. Nehru, at that time, Prime Minister Nehru also had a very great respect towards Comrade AKG. So, in fact, we miss such a great leader today. Our subject today is democracy, judiciary, and social justice. Today, democracy is in danger. Even parliamentary democracy is in danger. Many eyebrows are rising against various verdicts of the judiciary and even the Honorable Supreme Court of India and other courts. And social justice is a distant dream nowadays. It is more and it is going in a more and more pathetic condition nowadays. If you consider the Babri Masjid verdict in terms of judiciary of the latest Shastra situation in UP. Poor girl was brutally murdered and later cremated without any, basics, or without any, without following any norms. So social justice also, we don't know how the situation is going to improve. For today, what we need, a leader like AKG who can fight against all these kind of social evils, stand up and argue and fight, struggle for democracy to survive, to maintain the sanctity of the judiciary, and to ensure social justice all. So for all people, especially the political class, they should study more, AKG more. They should try to follow his footsteps more, and you should know how to take up issues and fight it to win, like AKG showed and proved in when he was in the political circle of the country. And today, we are happy for the fact that we have Sri Vikas Ranjan Bhattacharya. He is a senior advocate and is very well versed about all these subjects we are talking about. And I hope his speech will give more light to our knowledge. And I would, without adding more, I would request Sri Vikas Ranjan Bhattacharya to take over. And I just want to mention that if the viewers have got any questions or any clarification they want to ask to our chief guest, please put it in your chat box. We will compile it at the relevant one. We'll put to our chief guest. Thank you all, and I welcome Sri Vikas Ranjan Bhattacharya. Please.
Good evening, my friends. I'm really very much thankful to Jana Sanskriti. They have given me this opportunity to pay my respect to a great leader of the people. A.K. Gopalan, as is known lovingly to everybody, is AKG. He had started his career as a teacher. That's very important. As a young man, he had started his career as a teacher, and then, leaving his teaching career, he plunged into the movement of Salt Satyagraha under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. This was the first political movement in which he had plunged into as a young man, and then he was imprisoned. His imprisonment is a very important factor in his life, which would show that at each and every stage of the qualitative improvement of his mass movement career, he has been under imprisonment for a number of times. And in fact, he is much more known to the bigger world than the political world, the people who fight for human rights, who fight for the basic liberty of the common man. Everybody first has to go through the case which was fought by Comrade A.K. Gopalan, and it's a well-known case in the parliament, in the judiciary of our country. A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras, which is the first after the independence and after the constitution was adopted, where the personal liberty issue was raised and discussed. I will come to that later. And then he had joined the Congress Socialist Party. One interesting part of it that he did not keep himself confined only with this political movement, but he got involved with the social movement as well. He had led the movement of Garuveda Satyagraha, where the untouchables, as it is known as Harijans, as described by Mahatma Gandhi, for their respect in the society and acceptability fought. Then he had appreciated that this sort of struggle cannot get the desired goal unless there is a class struggle. He joined the trade union movement. He had built up the trade union struggle. Then he had built up the peasants struggle. He was the first elected president of Kisan Sabha in 1951 in Calcutta. Therefore, from step by step, he had gone into the bigger world of class struggle to establish the people's right and for a classless society. That was his perception. I will take you, according to my humble understanding of the whole situation, from the point of view of the constitutional principle and also from the point of view of the democratic principle and how it was done. Now, the first question would be what really encouraged him to participate in salt satyagraha, which was led by Mahatma Gandhi. To my mind, if I give a quotation from Mahatma Gandhi, I think this, which was also one of the foundation for which Comrade A.K. Gopalan thought initially to be a participant of Salt Satyagraha. What did the Mahatma Gandhi say? That's very important. I quote, there is on the face of the earth no other country that has the problem that India has of chronic starvation and slow death. A process of dehumanization. The solution must therefore be original. In trying to find it, we must discover the causes of the tremendous tragedy. It means the leveling down of the few rich in whose land is concentrated the bulk of the nation's wealth on the one hand, and the leveling up of the semi-starved naked millions on the other. A non-violent system of government is clearly an impossibility. I quote, I repeat, a non-violent system of government is clearly an impossibility so long as the wide gulf between the rich and the hungry millions persists. The contrast between the palaces of New Delhi and the miserable hovels of the poor laboring class nearby cannot last one day in a free India in which the poor will enjoy the same power as the richest in the land. A violent and revolution is certainly one day, unless there is a voluntary abdication of riches and the power that riches give and share them for the common good. This was the perception of Mahatma Gandhi when he had felt that unless the huge difference between the rich and the poor is wiped out, there must be some violent struggle for the purpose of achieving this goal. Now, this is the idea of Mahatma Gandhi while describing the Indian condition, which probably, and I am sure that which is one of the philosophical reason which had invited and encouraged Comrade A.K. Gopalan to be a part of peaceful Satyagraha movement led by Mahatma Gandhi. But what was the perception of A.K. Gopalan? He was a Marxist leader. And according to the Marxist principle, what would be the state? The Marxists constitute the state and its actions in terms of a struggle among classes formed and motivated by the mode and relations of production. The state was the agent of a ruling class or of a hegemonic class coalition. Both paradigms depicted a reflexive state whose nature and actions mirrored equilibrium of either organized interests or class. Mahatma Gandhi wanted that these differences between the poor and the rich has to be removed. But what was the foundational reason of these huge differences, economic, philosophical reason, that could be very well appreciated by Comrade A.K. Gopalan from his Marxist principle, which I have already read, that this is the Marxist outlook for which he had started the Kisan movement and the trade union movement. Ultimately, the India achieved its freedom, though admittedly that was a truncated freedom. The India as a whole, as it was under the British regime, the British India could not be kept united. Freedom came through the legislation in the British Parliament by Indian Independence Act and the Transfer of Power Act. I am not going to that arena today, but this independence came at the cost of the millions of people. But what did this independence bring to us? What we say that after the independence, we have obtained a constitution. Now, in the Constitution Assembly, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, then the Prime Minister, he said, this is very important, that why did we accept this democracy? Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru says, we have definitely accepted the democratic process. Why have we accepted it? He is putting question to himself. He says, well, for a variety of reasons, because we think that in the final analysis, it promotes the growth of human beings and of society. Because, as we have said in our constitution, we attach great value to individual freedom. Because we want the creative and adventurous spirit of man to grow, it is not enough for us merely to produce the material goods of the world. We do want high standards of living, but not at the cost of man's creative spirit, his creative energy, his spirit of adventure, not at the cost of all those fine things of life which have ennobled man throughout ages. Democracy is not merely a question of elections. The question before us is how to combine democracy with socialism through peaceful and legitimate means. Now, AKG was the preacher of socialism. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru says we have accepted the democracy to reach socialism. How this is to be achieved? Now we have to go back to the Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution in its preamble has very categorically and specifically said that it will be a democratic republic. Definitely the people will vote and elect a government. But what that elected government would do? Would they run a fashion show? Would they run a food fair? Would they create the cow shelter? What would the government do? The new government, which is the republic, what have to be done by them? The Constitution says, the preamble is very, very specific. I just read the important part of the preamble, though it is well known to everybody. It says that we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure, notice, we constitute this republic to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political. This justice word has a huge intendment. This is just not a word. And it says justice, social, economic, and political. On what foundation? Liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. Equality of status and of opportunity. And to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual. I would pause here for a moment. This dignity of individual was the later incorporation by Dr. Ambedkar. He felt that in India, the individual dignity is not there. He was aware of this Brahmanic culture and he was victim of this social discrimination. Even today, we do not show respect and dignity to an individual. We still go by your class, Varna. This class is not economic class, the Varna, Ucha Varna, higher class, the Dalits, the Shudras, and still now you will find the so-called Brahmins, they despise the Dalits. The immediate instance is just the unfortunate killing of a Dalit girl. She was not only raped, she was not only brutally tortured, and she was not allowed to have the last right according to her family's desire. The state overpowered everything and burnt out the body. And you will find no reaction from the mainstream media, because those mainstream medias are controlled by the upper class community. They are controlled by money power. That money power is the reflection of the control by the upper class community. Anyway, I will come to that later. Therefore, a basic perception was we have to have social and economic justice. Now, in this context, what did the Nehru say? Nehru said, socialism means using the planned development of an industrial society to eliminate poverty, provide social justice, create a self-reliant economy, and assure national independence and security in world politics. The socialist state would serve society by providing collective and public goods from which everyone would benefit. Then he says that equally importantly, concentrations of private economic power were to be eliminated. I repeat, concentration of private economic power were to be eliminated or controlled so that they could not appropriate state authority or resources or unduly influence the choice and implementation of state policy. This was the basic perception. Today, under Modi regime, we are really destroying this. They are encouraging the concentration of private economic power. They are encouraging this private economic power to control the policy. I am not going to now discuss these labor bills and the Kisan bills, the peasants in bill, which is the amendment of law at the dictation of this concentration of wealth by the section of the community who have the control over the economic resources, economic power. This being the attitude which encouraged the country to build up very many national projects. We have seen immediately after the independence, government of India had 5-year plannings, keeping in mind the Soviet plan. After the Second World War, the way the Soviet had really developed, I just would request all of you, I am not going to detail on that, the experience of Rabindranath Tagore, when he had visit to Russia, there's a well-known piece of article by him, Letters from Russia, where he has said that this is a new country. The world has seen new evolution, where the poor and the neglected people got the education, they were empowered, and they have now become the main resource of Soviet economy and the Soviet social culture. These letters from Russia is worth reading. I am sure everybody will read whenever they get a chance. We therefore had a preamble of the Constitution, which is the guiding principle of our democracy and the justice delivery system. This was understood by the judges. I just give you the quotation from D.S. Nakara's case with Justice Desai. He had said, quote, the preamble, that is the preamble of the Constitution, which is the floodlight illuminating the path to be pursued by the state. This should be the mantra, which was the mantra of Comrade AKG. The preamble, which is the floodlight illuminating the path to be pursued by the state. Today we have to ask, is really state really pursuing the floodlight of preamble, which is illuminating the path? The answer would be no. Therefore, we have to be very much sure and conscious to keep this coveted preamble of our Constitution to be implemented. Here says, the preamble, which is the floodlight illuminating the path to be pursued by the state, now expresses the high ideal of socialism. The principal aim of socialist state is to eliminate inequality in income. Mind it, this is not the speech of Comrade AKG, neither the theory projected by this Jana Sanskriti or theory propounded by the speaker. This I am quoting from a Supreme Court judgment. Under the Constitution, Supreme Court has been empowered to protect and explain the Constitution. Supreme Court is the protector and the interpreter of the Constitution. They are saying, the principal aim of socialist state is to eliminate inequality in income and status and standards of life, for which AKG fought throughout his career. That there should be no inequality in income, there should be no inequality in status and standards of life. Basic framework of socialism is to provide a decent standard of life to the working people, and especially economic security from cradle to the grave. Now we see the newborn babies are sold in the market by the parents just for their survival. And the Supreme Court, as far back as 1983, was saying, I repeat, the basic framework of socialism is to provide a decent standard of life to the working people, and especially economic security from cradle to the grave. From birth to death, there is no chance of giving any relaxation. It was such a socialist state which the preamble directs the center of power, legislative, executive, and the judiciary to set up. Our combination of legislative judiciary, not only the executive and this, legislative, judiciary as well. Judiciary has preamble to be kept from a wholly feudal society to a vibrant, throbbing socialist society. A long but long journey, the full of every state action must be directed and must be so interpreted to take society one step towards the goal. What we say is socialism, but every state you have to.
Sorry, there is some disturbance. There is some disturbance, audio disturbances.
For process uh,
Oh, voice is cracking and it's
I
not
don't
coming
know
out properly. Yeah.
from
Maybe
oh,
some network, maybe some network issue. Oh, sorry, friends. There are some audio issues with him. I think he's trying
network
to.
is very poor. I'm just trying to switch to another.
Yeah, please, please, please. I think he's trying to correct it, and hopefully he'll be back soon. Please stay tuned. Yeah, I think he's joining again.
Is it okay?
You're audible now. You're audible now.
Okay, sorry. I'm very sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Some technical problem. Anyway, therefore, I was really talking about the Justice Desai's perception of the Indian Constitution. Now, let us see. This was the perception of a sitting Supreme Court judge. He had delivered this judgment. Now, let us see how does the academicians. Professor Upendra Bakshi is a very well-known academician in the constitutional law. How he has said. He says, in a socialist constitution, workers may not be conceived as mere vendors of the toil or marketable commodities to be purchased by owners of capital. Workers are producers of wealth as much as capital, which we are demanding today. Had the government, you have forced me to go out of my job, your duty is to give me compensation. This idea flows not from our own demand, but this is the critical analysis by Professor Bakshi. I repeat, workers are producers of wealth as much as capital, nay, very much more. Capital would be impotent without labor. Therefore, they are equal partners with capital in the enterprise. The preamble and directive principles thus construed yield unmistakably the conclusion that the enterprise, which is a center of economic power, should be controlled not only by capital, but also labor, especially when it is sought to demolish that center of economic power. Therefore, whenever the question of growth comes, the government's duty would be to ensure and secure the labor, because the capital becomes important without the labor. Unless labor is given, labor value is added, the capital has no value. This is the conception which we get from our Indian constitution. And the court does not really stayed there. Court did not stagger on that. From time to time, court went on discussing and deciding what is the constitutional goal and what is the social justice. I just give you the another important decision which was delivered in 1995. Justice Desai spoke in 1983. Now in 1995, Supreme Court says social justice is a fundamental right. Though under the chapter of fundamental right, you don't get social. Encompass human personality in its full blossom, which invigorated health, which is a wealth to the workman to earn his livelihood, to sustain the dignity of person. You see how the dignity of person, which is a part of the preamble, comes into it. To sustain the dignity of person and to live a life with dignity and equality. The expression life assured in Article 21 does not connote mere animal existence or continued drudgery through life. It has a much wider meaning, which includes right to livelihood, better standard living, hygienic conditions in the workplace, and leisure. Supreme Court further says, the concept of social justice, I am stressing much on social justice because Comrade AKG fought throughout his life for social justice. The concept of social justice, which the Constitution of India engrafted, consists of diverse principles essential for the orderly growth and development of personality of every citizen. Social justice is thus an integral part of justice in the generic sense. Social justice is a dynamic device to mitigate the sufferings of the poor, weak, Dalits, tribals, and deprived sections of the society, and to elevate them to the level of equality to live a life with dignity of person. Here the Constitution thinks of upliftment of these economically weaker sections. They say the weak, Dalit, tribals, and deprived sections of society, and to elevate them to the level of equality to live a life with dignity of person. State should provide. It's a duty of the state. I again say the state doesn't mean only the executive and the legislature, but the judiciary as well. State should provide facilities and opportunities to enable them to reach at least minimum standard of health, economic security, and civilized living while sharing according to their capacity, social and cultural heritage. Justice in preamble implies equality consistent with the with the competing demands between distributive justice with those of cumulative justice. Justice aims to promote the general well-being of the community as a whole, as well as individual excellence. Social democracy means way of life which recognizes liberty, equality, and fraternity as principle of life. They are the Trinity. Social justice is the goal of Constitution, not possible to achieve without active and concerted support of persons connected with the justice dispensation system. Therefore, the Supreme Court admits that this is also their responsibility to ensure that the social justice is established by the state. Now, social justice, equality, and dignity of persons are cornerstone of the Constitution. Social justice is a dynamic device to mitigate the sufferings of the poor, weak, Dalits, tribals, and deprived sections of the society, and to elevate them to the level of equality to live a life with dignity. My first question is, these are the issues on which Comrade AKG fought throughout his life. He had organized the peasants, he had organized the workers, he had organized the Communist Party, keeping this Marxist principle of state, which I have already placed before you, so that these class struggles are ensured to bring about the social justice, which is the purpose of our constitution. Now, how this constitution is to be interpreted, is to be discussed, that we have already seen our Supreme Court has done, but all the constitution of the world, they have also had delivered much on that. This is also important, we should learn. Now, Justice Brandeis of the Supreme Court said, those who won our independence believed, I am citing this to show that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, what did they really think of our freedom and what was their perception about the new state to be formed. Then this is also recognized by the constitutional leaders. Those who won our independence believed that the final end of the state was to make men free to develop their faculties, and that in its government of deliberative forces should prevail over the arbitrary. They believe that the greatest means to freedom is an inert people, that public discussion is a political duty. Kindly note this, that the public discussion is a political duty, and this should be a fundamental principle of the government. They recognize the risk to which all human institutions are subject, but they knew that order cannot be secured merely through fear of punishment for its infraction, that it is hazardous to discourage thought, hope, and imagination, that fear breeds repression. Recognizing the occasional tyrannies of governing majorities, they amended the constitution so that the free speech and assembly should be guaranteed. Fear of serious injury cannot alone justify suppression of free speech and assembly. Men feared witches and burnt women. It is the function of speech to free men from the bondage of irrational fears. This is the concept which was enunciated by the American jurists long back. Now, in our country, we have seen when the Supreme Court in the earlier days emphasized for social justice, emphasized for upliftment of the human dignity, emphasized for upliftment of the economic status, there we find now that a sense of fear is sought to be imposed by the government. If you speak against the government policy, then you are threatened. If you are a student, you raise his voice. If you say that हमें मनुवाद से आजादी चाहिए, then you have to go to jail. This fear psychosis, Justice Brandeis condemned. He said these fear psychosis would ultimately destroy the constitution. If this fear psychosis is sought to be created now, which is going to destroy the constitution, we have seen the last night. The unfortunate girl, her body was burned at the midnight, and with the entire police force, and her family was kept confined under threat. Always the fear is being sought to be inflicted by this government, thereby they are destroying our constitution. What we should understand, say that a democratic society can survive despite widespread popular misunderstanding and disagreement about basic democratic and constitutional values. Democratic viability is saved by the fact that those who are most confused about democratic ideas are also likely to be politically apathetic. Lipset has pointed out that apathy undermines consensus, but to this one may add the corollary observation that apathy also furnishes its own partial corrective by keeping the doubters from acting upon their differences. In a classic paper, Gabriel Armand, an American political scientist working on the comparative politics, claimed that European democracies are unstable because of a fragmented political culture, cognitive, affective, and evaluative orientational towards the political system. while Anglo-American system have a homogeneous secular political culture. More recent empirical studies indicate deep value divisions in allegedly homogeneous societies. The standard response to the political or cultural heterogeneity objection is that democratic politics is the form and practice that enables overcoming fragmentation. However, ethnic and religious divisions may be deeper than cultural ones and may result in insurmountably antagonistic political movements, which we are facing today. Today, the government is encouraging this religious fragmentation. And this religious fragmentation, the way it is encouraged, would ultimately destroy our democratic fabric and destroy our constitution. Equality means equal concern and respect across difference. Therefore, equality doesn't mean providing only equal opportunity. Here they say equality is equal concern and respect across difference. It does not presuppose the elimination or suppression of difference. Can you get this similarity where the American constitutional judges and the courts were speaking this long back? Our country, we are facing it today, the similar situation where the difference is sought to be gagged. The court says equality therefore does not imply a leveling or homogenization of behavior or extolling one form as supreme and another as inferior. Hindutva is superior, others are inferior, but an acknowledgement and acceptance of difference. At the very least, it affirms the difference should not be the basis of exclusion, marginalization, and stigma. Prime Minister says that with the attire you can identify the people who are doing mischief. If this is the perception of the Prime Minister, which goes basically against the constitutional principle, which the constitutional principle says that at the very least it affirms that difference should not be the basis for exclusion, marginalization, and stigma. At best, it celebrates the vitality that difference brings to any society. What is at stake is not simply a question of removing an injustice experienced by a particular section of the community. At issue is a need to affirm the very character of our society as one based on tolerance and mutual respect. The test of tolerance is not how one finds space for people with whom and practices with which one feels comfortable, but how one accommodates the expression of what is discomfiting. This is lacking today in our Indian society, which is being encouraged by the ruling political party instead of creating a situation of acceptability, respecting the difference, providing the different voice and encouragement to live in the society. They are trying to create a situation of fear, and they have already been able to create such a situation that if you belong to a particular religious community, if you belong to the weaker section of the social custom, then you are absolutely stigmatized. You are outthrown. This situation has been created by this government, which is not healthy for either the Indian democracy or the constitution. Here, the role of the judiciary is very important. So long I have been trying to demonstrate before you that how the Indian judges at the early stage and how the American judges have from time to time specified what should be the role. Now we find recently that the Indian judiciary is succumbing. We have noticed how the Ram Janambhoomi judgment was delivered. By delivering the Ram Janambhoomi judgment, the Supreme Court unfortunately has created a situation where the rationality, the reasoning, the constitutional principles were all compromised at the behest of the majority class. This is anti-democratic. And the latest judgment about this destruction of structure known as Babri Mosque is really a very sorry state of affairs. That has also created a situation. Now people say there is no good going to court. There will be no justice. Such a huge structure is demolished and the court says it was not planned. It was done suddenly. These are all bereft of reason. Sometimes the judgments are coming which really strikes the basic root of reasoning. This is done because of a political situation where philosophy are sought to be enforced by the government through its machineries. The Prime Minister goes for Ram Janmabhoomi foundation stone. That creates a fear psychosis amongst the other sections of the people. We have to fight it out. And that was the purpose for which Comrade A.K. Gopalan fought throughout his life. And therefore, remembering him while remembering the Indian constitution, the judiciary, and the Indian democracy is a very important subject. With these words, I conclude my deliberation. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bhattacharya. You exactly explain what exactly the situation of the country is about the subject, and you went through records and gave very good inputs to all the viewers. There are some questions some questions have come up, but generally it is almost you are covered. But again, the people are having a severe apprehension about our country's future. That was the thing. One, you said uh, even the ruling dispensation today encourages religious fragmentation and all. On the other side, there are argument or there is a feeling that even court succumb to their or they act as their too. So in this situation, when the ruling dispensation or anybody works or goes or makes policies, may take decision against the constitution of India, I think it is the court to set the things right and give a correct direction to the ruling front, also or a ruling dispensation, administration, whatever it is, legislation, whatever it is. But is that really happening? What we are seeing is it is not giving us any hope. And in this situation, when the Constitution, Supreme Court or the courts are also not taking any steps to protect the Constitution, where should we go or where will we go? What is the alternative?
I just answer you very briefly. Please note that during the emergency, there was suspension of fundamental rights. And there's a very well-known case known as ADM Jabbulpur versus State of Madhya Pradesh. There, the Supreme Court at that point of time conceded to the extent that, yes, your fundamental rights would remain under suspension during the emergency. Kindly think of the political situation then. To my understanding, the judges are also being a part of the society, sometimes get influenced with the social phenomena. Always they cannot remain beyond that and above to that. Here, that judgment of ADM Jabbulpur was subsequently severely criticized by the Supreme Court. And now also we have seen that when these migrant workers were on the road, initially the Supreme Court was not willing to accept their plea. But subsequently, the very same Supreme Court with the other judges, with due respect, having appreciated the public anger after those people were found to be walking on the road and the court says you are helpless, then there's a huge public anger. And that got reflected and the Supreme Court took that matter into suo motu consideration. Therefore, I do not say that everything is lost. It depends on the people's reaction. If the people are very much active and agitative to keep their democratic and constitutional right intact, then the judges will also feel that, no, I am a part of this feeling. I cannot go beyond that. That's my reading of the situation. That's not my reading only. At point of time, the Churchill had said that don't worry, the judges also reflects the class bias in their judgment. Though for saying that, EMS Namudripad was put in contempt. But this is a historical reality that the judges being a part of this our society, they sometimes succumb to this social pressure or the huge media campaign. They are not free from that. That's why my point of view is that we have to develop such a huge mass movement, which will also create a perception in the mind of the judge that people are not happy. Now we have been noticing that with retirement of a particular judge, other judges are saying something else. We have seen the judgment of Aurangabad Division Bench, the Bombay High Court Aurangabad Bench. We have seen the judgment of the very recently Delhi High Court. We have seen the judgment of Lucknow High Court Bench. Therefore, the judges are there who still feel that the Indian social democracy and democratic principle has to be upheld. Social justice being the core of Indian constitution, that has to be encouraged. There are judges who feel that no, concentration of power in the hands of the capital is more important. That is their social perception. And we have to make them understand with this sort of discussion, with this sort of seminars, that no, you cannot go beyond that. I'll just give you a passing reference. Just the day before, I was discussing a presence bill conducted by one of the state of South. One of the judges, well, I have placed my initial comment, said these are all bygone days. I say, oh God, the constitution is not bygone. Constitution is still alive. And you being the judge, you have to uphold the constitution. But his reflection was he has a, according to him, he comes from a society of cultivators, but there must be big landlords, not cultivators. Therefore, his reflection comes from his own, I mean, own perception about the social division. It happens. Therefore, nothing to be so much get frustrated. We have definitely the hope. The hope is that mass movement, which was appreciated by Comrade AKG. And that's why while his case for personal freedom was refused by the Supreme Court, but that did not deter him. He went on struggling for the personal freedom, and thereafter the constitution from time to time changed and given different verdict. That always happens.
One last question, because there are two things. One, we are very happy and feel positive for the fact that what is an alternative, you said it correctly. But at a time when Arnav Goswami issue gets priority over migrant issue, and Prashant Bhushan's issue is so what exactly happened. So we people are very much scared. And one more thing is media activism, or proactive media activism is somehow responsible for judiciary to go for such action, or majority feeling, whatever you say. This kind of, is media behind or has got any role behind any kind of verdicts?
You see, I may just take cue from Noam Chomsky. He has said that now the world, there is no democracy, there's only mediocrity. And media is purchased by corporate house. We have seen in our country 90% of the mainstream media are run and sponsored by the corporate houses. Therefore, they will have to definitely reflect the class angle and the economic advantages of these corporate houses. They will not bother about these migrants working and dying. They will rather bother if the government asks that during this pandemic you have to pay the salary of the workers. That will hit them. They'll say, oh God, how could an employer pay when they are not getting any service? But they will not bother if when the workers are walking and dying on the street. They say, oh, what nonsense. They don't have any common sense. They should have been stayed back. Therefore, the entire purpose is to create a situation, a psychological situation where you are always taken against the working class, poor people, and your sympathies are diverted towards the rich. Have you not seen that now the media is busy with one Sushant Rajput, and whether the Bollywood is addicted or not? When the entire society is burning, the prisons are, the workers are thrown out of employment. They are fighting for their survival. These are not the issues. They want to, in fact, if I may say, they want to put you under the drug of media hallucination, so that you are not really prompt enough to react to the real situation of the society. That is Noam Chomsky said, and he talked of the manufacturing consent, and the media is really having so much of campaign. By that, they are trying to manufacture their consent. While you will be talking to somebody, some people have said, I was also hearing some lawyer on that date.
I'm afraid your
What's the
voice.
wrong in it?
Yeah.
If the basic perception is that you are comparing computer with your food material, just think that this is the perception created by the media every time. Therefore, this is also another class struggle against this media controlled by the big houses.
Thank you. Despite all, the present situation, the fears, I mean, everything. Your words gave us fresh, positive energy, and it gives us a feeling that still something is left. I repeat, still something is left. Thank you very much, and I would request Mr. Sonu Vincent to conclude the program. And I forgot to mention Sri Advocate P.V. Surendranath is that altogether. He is always with us, and he was, I think, as a guiding light to us. We express our thanks to him also. Sonu.
Good evening, all. So, on behalf of Jan Samskriti, I take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to our speaker for today, Sri Vikas Ranjan Bhattacharya, who is Senior Advocate, MP, and President of All India Lawyers Union. Sir, thanks a lot. He has touched upon various issues which are shaping our lives and is most significant to our existence itself. So, especially at the time when media and the dominant forces are trying hard to divert our attention from real issues, it is the need of the hour to talk to the public, spread awareness, and say the truth of AKG. And today, Sri Vikas Ranjan Bhattacharya has very well done it. So, on behalf of Jan Samskriti, I express our sincere thanks to you. Along with this, we have Advocate P.V. Surendranath here with us. He was always being supportive of all our efforts. So we thank you, sir, for your support. And last, we give thanks to all our viewers for being with us today and have raised several questions which are very significant. So we thank you all to be there for us always. So with this, I also remind you about tomorrow's program, which is a tribute to late SP Balasubramaniam. So it is planned tomorrow at 4 p.m. on FB Live. So I request you all to be there for the program too. And with this, we sign off. Thanks.
Thank you all, and good night.